welcome to the Hard Money Show, where we talk about real estate, home loans, and media. I am so excited to be able to bring this podcast to whoever is going to listen to it. I really hope that this podcast is going to be able to help two different groups for the most part. The first part is really the consumers, right? That's who we care about. If you're in this sort of field, real estate as a career, the consumer is really who matters to us, right? And so I want to be able to provide high level information in a way that people will really enjoy consuming it. And I think podcasts is really that way to do it, right? I listen to podcasts, my wife listens to podcasts, our friends listen to podcasts. You throw them on when you're working out, you throw them on when you're cleaning. You know, it's such a great way to consume information. And so, I think there was a lot of ways that I wanted to get this information out, and this one really made the most sense to me. And so I'm hoping to be able to help people understand, how do they, understand the real estate market? How do they understand the mortgage market? How do those two things partner together? And ultimately, how do they get on the housing ladder? And if they are on the housing ladder, how do they continue to move up the housing ladder? That's really, where we want people to be at, to understand, and really to learn how to build that generational wealth. The other side of this podcast is to help other realtors, right? So we want to help other realtors by any information that I can give, any information that I can loan, or any coaching that I can give. I'm hoping that'll be able to come out in this podcast, because although, I haven't been in the real estate and mortgage industry for extremely long, and I'm sure there's far more people that are highly competent, maybe even more so than I am. I do have background in sales. I do have background in media, that makes me a valuable resource to this sort of industry. So I'm hoping to be able to provide my expertise to those that are there, but also to bring on other realtors that are going to be able to share their experiences, share where they think the market's at or where it's going, and provide some insight for the other realtors that are out there, right? I think that there's a lot that we can offer each other that we're not, and this can be that platform to do that. So I'm hoping to have both of these intertwined and make this ultimately an entertaining experience that you're going to be able to get some education from, right? So I wanted to start this podcast by really kind of telling you who I am, my back experience, why I got into this, because as we kind of move forward into the other podcasts, you're not going to really hear, a ton about me. It's really going to be about the people that are there, or what's going on in the market, and how can we help you. And so I wanted to kind of dive in so you have some background, you have some understanding for who I am, why I'm doing this, and ultimately, what my efforts are aimed to. So I for a very long time was a coach. I coached swimming, I coached wrestling. I've mentored as well, and I've ran a lot of stuff. I've been team captains, all of this sort of stuff. And so that's always been my driving force, is helping others. Now, I know that can be really difficult, and I know it can be really time consuming, but it's just something that I've always very much enjoyed. And on top of that, I've always felt that by helping others, I reinforce the knowledge base that I've learned or am learning, and it makes me better at what I'm doing. And so with that sort of thing in mind, I thought that it would be a very good opportunity to use this podcast as a way to continue my passion for coaching, as well as continue to learn from others that are out there in the industry. And so taking that along with kind of my back experience, which is getting my undergraduate degree in Sacramento as Stingers Up, for those of you who went to Sac State, got my bachelor's degree in communication, specifically organizational communication. And that really just means, how can I help people within their business or within, a large corporation. How can I help the internal communication there be better to improve productivity and essentially earn more money, right? Because that's what businesses want. They want to earn more money. And so I kind of learned those strategies and a lot of other things. And I know that a lot of people think that getting a degree in communication is maybe a waste of time. But ultimately, I think any time you get any sort of education, it's only as valuable as you make it. And so for me, I've realized that there's a lot of people that have a very difficult time communicating with others, understanding that there's different communication strategies that come from that happen when you're, with someone individually, when you're in a small group, when you're in a large group, when you're giving a presentation, these sort of things. And I find that being able to develop that is very critical to being successful in any industry, but hopefully as well as in this industry. And so that's what my undergrad was in. And then I got my master's in media and public relations. And this was when I decided to go for my master's. This was really something that I was excited and passionate about because I had a very long background in sales. I'd always kind of gravitated towards sales, and I was honestly a little worried that I was just going to end up in sales for the rest of my life because it's a relatively stressful place to be. If anyone's ever been in sales, you know what I'm talking about. You know how it can feel to not know 100% that your paycheck is going to be consistent from month to month. And so that was always kind of a fear of mine. And oddly enough, I've ended up in an industry where, primarily you're paycheck to paycheck. So funny enough, but I got my master's in media and public relations. I kind of paired that up with my sales. And then in my free time, I learned about advertising. I learned about marketing. As well as, for the last 15 years or so, I've learned how to do photography, videography, editing, develop music, obviously podcast, how to stream, kind of all those things that for me were integral because I always thought, well, I can't afford to hire people out. But I can't afford to buy some equipment. I always have some time to learn a new skill set. And ultimately, for me, I'm the type of person that likes to know at least a little bit about how every part of something works. And for me to be effective, and I've always wanted to be the type of person that, was, a manager or an executive or something like that. But I thought, how could you be a great manager or an executive or a CEO or whatever that may be without really understanding what these people do day to day, right? And so I've kind of taken that sort of mentality. And as I was developing that, I was getting my degrees and I kind of got my first real full-time job here in Sacramento. I started to develop those skills and into my business that I was doing while I was doing my full-time job. So I was a co-founder of a gym in Sacramento. We were the first renewable energy gym in the country. And we had a lot of publicity. We got to go to Portugal for a web summit. We were invited to do that. That was an amazing experience. We won the National Hispanic Chamber of Commerce Award. So we were awarded with that. We were all over the news, all over the country. But most importantly, we had people that wanted to franchise across the country. So I think we had about 18 to 20 individuals in different states that were just waiting for that opportunity to franchise through us. Now, when you're starting a business and you're becoming an entrepreneur, you quickly realize that you have to essentially be everybody at the same time. You have to learn how to do marketing. You have to learn how to do sales. You have to learn how to do, operations and bookkeeping and all of that stuff. And luckily, at the time, I had a business partner. We started it together. It was originally his idea, great idea. But I think he wanted me in there because I had the marketing background, as well as he had never run a gym or been in a gym, and I had for many years been in gyms and working in gyms. And so, you learn very quickly to get to do that. And luckily, I had been building those sort of skill sets as I continue to grow. And now I was being able to implement it into a business scenario. And so we had done, I was started this new job. I was working for a nonprofit. And because I'm extremely competitive, I wanted to be, the best in that business or in that nonprofit that I was working in. And luckily, I got placed into a really good team. I got placed into a really good situation. But ultimately, for the 3 years that I was there, I was, for all intents and purposes, the best employee there by peer metrics. Right now, I can't say that maybe if I was liked the most or whatever that is, but by peer metrics, because this nonprofit, everything you do is performance based and measured, and this is across the entire country. I outperformed almost always in the things that we were doing, and because of that, I moved up very quickly. It did take time away from me being able to develop the business, and I think in part that's why I ended up stepping away from the business. In another part, the business decided to go in a different, my business partner and other people involved decided to go in a different direction. And it kind of left me in this position where I had a lot of equipment from, filming and marketing and all of this stuff. I had learned an extremely strong and important skill set. I've done consulting for a couple years for brand development. And I thought, what can I do with this? And I just kind of lucked out in the way that right next to where our gym was in Midtown Sacramento, there was a real estate brokerage there. And I hadn't talked necessarily to the broker there very much. I'd kind of said hi to him in passing and things like that. But I was kind of interested in real estate a little bit. Obviously, I kind of wanted to buy a house at some point, and I had these skills. And so I asked if he would be willing to have coffee for me. Now, I think this is an extremely important thing to understand, pay attention to, and maybe implement in your life. You need to take advantage of things that are available to you. I took a look at the real estate market from a media perspective, from a branding perspective, and I saw a huge gap. I saw extremely well done videos, extremely well done photos, and overarching branding done correctly. And maybe, again, that was in the top 10%, and then 90% just extremely bad, using their phones to take photos, descriptions of stuff not being done correctly, their branding not being done correctly. And I wasn't sure exactly if I was misunderstanding this, if this, if maybe this was just the norm in the market, or maybe I was just not seeing enough. And so I was kind of curious. And so I asked him if we could have coffee. We went and had coffee, and I kind of told him, like, hey, look, this is my background. This is my experience. I'm looking to possibly get involved in real estate, do drone work and videography and help people with their branding and stuff. Do you think that the market's saturated and that it's not needed? Or do you think that that I'm right about what I'm saying? And he said, you're 100% on the nose. Most realtors or most people in this industry are not doing a good job doing that. And some of them can't afford to outsource. Some of them aren't dedicating the time to do it. Whatever the case may be, but it isn't being done, as well as it could be. And that's really difficult for everybody involved, really, because let's use an example here of a seller realtor who is putting your house on the market. Well, their job is to do as best of a job as they can to present your house, to get as many people there as to get you the highest offer you can in the market that you're in. Well, if they're taking photos on their iPhone, now granted, iPhones have gotten a lot better, but if they're taking bad photos, right, they're not adjusting the lighting, they're not adjusting the rooms, if they're not writing up good descriptions, if they're not doing that correctly, they're not putting the best foot forward for you. And on the other side, as a buyer's realtor, you have to understand that, our clients have told us they want a certain thing, and we'll send them different listings, but people so often, what they see is how they're going to make the decision. It's kind of like when people say they eat with their eyes, right? It's just kind of the same thing in real estate. And so if you have bad photos up, a lot of times they might not go see that house because just the photos don't look good. Now, on the flip side, the people who do really great photos, really great videography, a lot of times those are extremely good, but they're also a little misleading. So, because you want the house to look as big as possible and look as nice as possible. But ultimately, I'd prefer that over, something where my client won't even consider it. And so that's where I was like, okay, this is somewhere that I can step in. I can package this together. I'll do 3D walkthroughs, I'll do drone work, I'll do photos and videos. And because I had experience in social media development and branding development, I'll help them make their open house flyers. I'll create their social media posts for them. And that's what I did. That's how I got into the industry. And I was extremely lucky in the fact that the brokerage at the time and the broker had actually already had made the decision that they wanted to start upgrading their in-house marketing. And so he actually invited me to join their team, to run the in-house marketing there and work with him hand in hand. And in doing so, when they had realtors that were doing listings, that I would be able to, he would give me that business, right? And so that for me was like a really great opportunity to step in and take advantage of what was going on in the market to try to really up that and provide some sort of service to realtors. And for me, it wasn't necessarily all about the money. So I was going to do it at a price point that made sense for people and that they could afford, right? Now, this ended up actually working out better than I thought, as it pertained to how we help the realtors, but I'll get into that a little bit later. So I was kind of doing that. I was working, 60 to 100 hours a week at the nonprofit that I was doing. I was doing extremely well there, but I was very stretched thin. At the time I was building a relationship and I was going to get engaged, and I was also helping build a business. And so all of that combated on each other really kind of slowed the reason that I got a real estate license. My broker kind of time and time again said, hey, you should get a real estate license. You should get a real estate license. You're going to all of these homes. You're putting all this stuff up. You might have the opportunity to get some buyers. And I was just like, man, I'm so like packed with everything I did. But I found a lull in what I was doing at one point, and I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to get my real estate license now. I kind of looked in, it said, oh, you can get it in about 3 months. And I was like, okay, cool. And so I actually recruited 2 of my friends to get it with me. And this was kind of a 2-part thing. I nonprofit is a really difficult place to work as it pertains to the funds that come into the nonprofit. It really is strongly dependent on how many, people are out there willing to give to it. And your ability to pay your bills might dissipate in a year if donations aren't where they need to be, right? Some nonprofits are that close to closing their doors. Others have some, influx of money and they can do okay. But I kind of saw the writing on the wall where I was, and I saw that I was already working so hard and that it was going to be, although I was getting promoted and I was moving up, I was going to have to move out of the state to get like another promotion, or I was going to have to do some sort of weird lateral move or whatever it was. And I was a little bit worried about the future of that organization. And so I pretty much said, okay, I need to have a backup. And that's how I've always been. I continue to learn other things just in case something happens. And so all 3 of us went through the education process. Now, for me, I thought the education was kind of difficult to learn. I thought that the test was difficult. I've heard from other people that they didn't think the test was very hard. And my buddy that I took it with, one of them, this was the case for him. He studied way less than I did. He retained stuff way quicker, and he did pretty well. Now, granted, you only have to get a 70 on the exam. So there's some kind of, wiggle room there as it pertains to getting your license. But ultimately, I've never been that kind of person. Like, I want to learn it as well as I can, especially if I'm going into it as a career. And so, that 3 month process ended up taking us about 6 months, and we ended up getting our license. All of us passed our exam within, I think, a week of each other, and we got our license, and that was awesome. And a funny thing about getting your license is we got it in December, so we wanted to wait till January, so we were active for a whole calendar year. So we were technically had our licenses for a month, but we didn't activate them until the next month. And so got my real estate license, and I had the media side. And so I was kind of learning these two parts of the industry. And I learned really quickly, and this was from my background in the past with the business. And before that, of realizing I need to know everything that's going on, I realized very quickly, man, it's super hard to be a realtor and not know how loans work, because my ability to do my job depends very heavily on this buyer being able to afford a home. And ultimately, this isn't exactly the same with the seller side, but that's where I was at. And I was like, I didn't like that feeling. I really didn't like not knowing what was going on. I didn't like that I couldn't properly communicate to all parties, what was going on with the financing, as well as I couldn't answer questions for the buyers because I didn't know how the financing worked. And so I was in a very advantageous position that our real estate brokerage also had a mortgage brokerage attached to it, and that my broker owned both of them. And so he let me get my loan license. Now, we had a lot of conversations and went back and forth about what's the proper etiquette for having a real estate license and having a loan license at the same time. A lot of people ask me about this because they think they can just have both and make all of this money by having both, right? Now, the most money that you can make from a deal would be to be the selling agent and the buying agent. So it's called double ending the deal. You do both sides. And if you're lucky, nobody will try to reduce your overall compensation. And then if you could also do the loan, that would be pretty significant. That could be anywhere from 6 to 7%, right? I mean, that's quite a bit on this transaction. Now, that's where we start to run into these ethical dilemmas, right? Because how can you do what's best for the buyer if you're representing the seller as well? And how can you do what's best for the seller if you're representing the buyer as well? And, and then there's the loan side as well. And the whole idea of, if you're a loan officer, you really should be feeding business to realtors. That way they'll feed business back to you, right? That's kind of the circular system that's in place for you to build a career here, right? If you do both of them, realtors are never going to want to give you work, and you're kind of stuck with only what you can produce. And that makes life really difficult for you to build as a career. And so we had those conversations, and I went through the process to get my licensing for my LO. That took me another about 6 months. Passed that exam. Again, I thought that exam was actually more difficult because there's a lot more laws that have to do with protecting the consumer, and all of the law changes that have happened because of the fraud that's happened, the ethic problems that are happening, as well as, putting people into bad loans, into houses they couldn't afford and things like that. And so learning that sort of stuff really kept reinforcing this idea in my head of, being ethical within this industry. And so I had, my 2 licenses, I had my 2 degrees, and I had, 15 years, 13 years at the time, or whatever it was, of my background in marketing and brand development and all of that. And so I started to learn the industry, and was really lucky to be in a brokerage where we were extremely busy. and I was doing a lot of loans. Sometimes I was doing anywhere from 10 to 20 loans a month. I was doing real estate. I was helping other people. And I was just really trying to consume as much information as I can from my broker. And I was very lucky that I worked hand in hand with him. We worked together. And I think this is where I'm currently at is help develop the business, right? So I have a kind of an unofficial title of VP of Development because I'm helping develop the brokerage on all fronts. And as we continue to grow and I continue to take on more responsibilities, I become a more valuable asset to the company. And I don't have a traditional real estate experience, right? Most realtors, they will maybe join a large brokerage and they focus just on real estate, or you might have somebody that's doing the loans and they focus heavy on that. And you don't kind of get a whole lot of overlap. And I was very lucky to work in a brokerage that their goal was to kind of combine knowledge, to work from an ethical space, and to do what's best for the consumer, that money isn't first. And so I was learning all of these important things, not only about how to do the job, but how to do it correctly and how to do what's best for your clients. And ultimately for me, that was extremely big selling point because I'd been involved with nonprofits for so long. So obviously my end all be all wasn't to earn a ton of money. My end all be all was how can I make the biggest impact in the world? How can I help the most people and how can I be happy that way? But I did want to be in a position where I was financially okay. And so I was learning how to do both of these at the same time. And the other unique thing that I was doing, because I'd learned how to work 100-hour weeks, I learned how to be successful, staying up late, waking up early, working all day, every single day. But I hadn't learned how to optimize my time. And I was starting to learn how to do that as well there, right? How do I turn a 12-hour day into a 10-hour day? How do I turn that 10-hour day into a 6-hour day, right? How do I fit all of that work that I was doing into a more condensed time by being more effective with the work that I do? And so that was a really great opportunity. And so I'm in a very lucky position where I hold my loan license, I hold my real estate license, I can utilize both, but typically I don't, right? I do real estate if there's a friend who needs help, if there's a family member that needs help, I will do that, or I will be a resource for somebody that wants information. That's kind of what I'm hoping this podcast, if you need real estate information, things like that, let's have a conversation. I can talk from the finance side and the real estate side, and then I can get you set up with one of my team members who we work hand in hand to make your transaction successful, right? I don't do a lot of real estate anymore, but I coach and help our realtors now. And so that's what I mean by this sort of capacity to where I'm helping realtors, I'm helping develop, I'm still, able to somewhat engage on that. And then on the other side of the loan side, I'm doing the same exact thing. And I've had the same opportunity to do that on the media side. So it's kind of like managing all three departments. And while I get to learn how to be the best at what I'm doing as well. And so to me, this has been such an amazing blessing. I've been so lucky to be able to benefit from my broker who's been in the industry for an extremely long time, has worked in all aspects of what it is to be in real estate. And ultimately, I hope to be able to continue to learn and grow from that. But I thought, okay, it's time. I've spent a lot of time learning. It's time to start getting this information out to people because that's the hardest thing to do. You would think that when you offer free things like first time home buyer seminar, things like that, and they're completely free, that people would be jumping to learn, how to be more financially responsible, how to set themselves up to own a home and things like that, but they don't. And I've had a lot of people who said, man, I wish I would have talked to you 3 months or 6 months or 12 months earlier, and they didn't. And because of that, we're having a much more difficult time getting things to move forward for them. And that's the sort of service that I want to provide. And I'm hoping that this will start early conversations because as a realtor, we're probably having conversations 12 months and less, right? If you're further than 12 months out from buying a house, it's probably not something that has to do with you finding a house that you want. It has something to do with finances, right? You're not in a position yet to buy a house, or you believe the market is not where it should be. And that's another thing that we could talk about at some other time. As an LO, I deal with people much further out, right? You might be 2 or 3 years out, 12 months out from being able to afford to buy a house, or really have a roadmap set up. And that's the type of services that I'm trying to get people implemented. And let's set up a roadmap for you to be successful. It takes time to improve your credit. It takes time to save money. It takes time to build these habits. Emergencies happen, things like that, right? Your funds get depleted, and the markets shift. And sometimes it isn't a great time to buy for you. And sometimes it's the very best time to buy for you. And we want to have that open dialogue. And I want to be able to navigate you into that 12-month where you're ready to start to buy, and then into that 6-month, into that 3-month. All right, let's get that offer put in. But it starts with a conversation, and ultimately that's where we need to be. And so I'm hoping that we'll be able to get some of that out of here. I'm hoping we're going to be able to educate people through this podcast. I'm hoping we're going to be able to inspire other realtors to work in a way that's best for their clients, and to help them develop skill sets to be better. And as well as for those realtors that are already doing amazing jobs, give them an opportunity to put their information out there so you can know who they are, right? And maybe to help you. And here's the thing, right? Ultimately, I almost always will say I'm the best. I mean, that's just the type of person I am, because I'm always going to work the hardest, I believe. But that doesn't mean that maybe I'm the best for you. Sometimes personalities clash. Sometimes, you want something specific. And so this will be your opportunity, right? Maybe you like me. Maybe you like the, third podcast person that was on here, whatever it may be. But it'll be an opportunity to provide more valuable information to the people that are out there. And so, you guys know a little bit about me. I'm hoping that I'll be able to share more about my experience as we move forward, and bring you guys valuable content. But the big thing will be entertainment, right? Is it entertaining? I don't know. I'm hoping it is. Hopefully people will tell me, like, whatever, that they thought they enjoyed it, or there's something else that I can do to make it better. And I'm all ears. So feel free to send me messages, comment, or whatever it may be. I take nothing offensive. I want to learn. I want to become better at this. I want to become a leader in providing this sort of information. And so that's really where we're at, and this is where we're going to start. So thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you so much for being on. I'm excited to bring you what would be the second episode, but really the first episode of where we're doing the formatting that we're doing. And so thank you guys. As always, you're here on the Hard Money Show, where we talk about real estate, home loan, and media. You guys have a great day.